This is a conversation with Phil, one of my dedicated students who has been on an incredible journey of learning Polish. In this episode, we dive into his experiences, challenges, and proud moments as he continues mastering one of the world's most difficult languages. But this conversation goes far beyond just language learning. We explore his first experience in Poland, attending a wedding in Białystok, where he met his future wife and fell in love with Polish culture. Polish weddings versus American weddings, from 12-hour celebrations to unforgettable midnight games. Raising a bilingual child, how he and his wife created a multilingual environment at home. The unexpected challenges and beautiful moments of watching their daughter grow up with both English and Polish. The two brains of language learning. Phil shares how his Polish brain is more emotional and how certain Polish words, traditions, and even smells trigger deep memories and feelings. Poland's deep cultural similarities with other European countries, the European way of life that connects Poles, Italians, and other cultures in ways many don't realize. We also talk about politics, technology, and the future. We discuss Donald Trump's return to power, Elon Musk's impact on the world, and the role of AI in shaping our future. How will AI affect jobs, language learning, and our daily lives? Will technology replace teachers, or will it remain just a tool to support real human connection? This is an insightful, fun, and thought-provoking conversation that highlights the power of dedication, the beauty of language learning, and the deep connection it can create across cultures. My ultimate goal is to create the best online Polish language course, and students like Phil inspire me to make that dream a reality. But I need your help too. Together we can build something extraordinary, an engaging, supportive, and impactful learning community for Polish learners around the world. Please subscribe to my YouTube channel, share your thoughts in the comments, and let me know what topics and resources would help you and your Polish learning journey. Thank you. So, the first question is, why did you start learning Polish?
Well, from watching your other podcast episodes, I'm your most typical student. I learned Polish because I went to Poland once and met a woman, and the stereotypical story goes from there.
Yeah, yeah. So tell me about this first meeting.
I would say my first experience in Poland was probably atypical, but life changing at the same time, right? So the first time I went to Poland. Now you have to remember the mindset I was in at that time when I got invited. I got invited to a wedding in Poland, but at that
Yeah,
time, how long had it been? It'd been maybe by the time I had gone to Poland, it had been maybe a year since I got divorced from my first wife, right? And I was in a mode of self development, reinventing myself. At the same time, I was probably a little bit grumpy about women in general, right? Because what had just happened to me. So, but at that during that entire year, whatever my friends were doing, I wanted to do. I wanted to, just learn about what I like doing again, right? So we were going on bike rides in mountains. We were going out to eat with my friends. We were doing I was just saying yes to everything. So my friend said, my coworker, he said, "Okay, listen, I'm inviting all you guys to a wedding in Poland." So yes, let's do it. I'm down. Let's go. Right? We get on the plane. We go to Poland. The and we stayed one day in Warsaw. We wanted just to see what was going on in Warsaw. We spent one day there. We went to the old town. We were more getting used to the time difference between Poland and America. That was kind of it. We slept a lot that first day. Then we got on a train to Białystok. first day in Białystok, we went to a bachelor party. So we were up till I don't even know how long, till morning, maybe. That
Yeah.
was Thursday. Friday, I think, I sat in the Stare Miasto in the old town, pretty much by the fountain the entire day, just trying to remember what happened, just trying to get my wits about me. And then Saturday was the wedding that we were going to.
Yeah.
So Saturday, I remember we went to the mass, and we were going to the reception after. And so we get to the reception, and the groom is showing us where we're gonna sit. There's like two or three long tables. It's not like an American wedding where there's a bunch of round tables, just very long tables taking up like half the room. Half the room's for tables, half the room's the dance floor, right?
Yeah.
And so he's walking us over to the table, and he's like, "Oh, by the way," he's like, "I just need to let you guys know that my mom had this great idea that since you guys don't speak any English, or sorry, you guys don't speak any Polish, she picked out girls that are gonna sit in between all of you. So there you go, have fun." And we we sat down, and then sitting on the right with me was one of his cousins. She spoke like 5 languages. But then sitting on the left is now my wife. So we actually have a picture. I think I probably showed you at some point. We have a picture literally the minute we're
Yes.
shaking hands with each other, and she's like, "Hi,
Yeah.
Joanna," and "Hi, I'm Phil." And so that was, I would say, that moment when we're shaking hands. There's very few times where you can look at your life and say, "This is a life-changing moment." That moment right there, literally changed my life in more ways than one.
Great. I love this story. Yeah.
So then, yeah, then just to wrap up that trip, like I was only there for a week, but then Saturday was the wedding. Sunday was the day after party. Right. We got home from the wedding maybe at 5 in the morning, and also my phone was ringing like at 9 in the morning, like 4 hours later, saying, "Hey, the Americans had like transportation to get us around. Like, hey, we had a driver that was driving us around. Hey, the driver's going to be here like in 45 minutes to pick us up to take us to the next day party." I was like, "Oh my God, I'm like another party." So
Now party.
specifically, I remember that next day party. I got there, and we sit down at a table, and I was just sitting with my friends, and I'm just like hunched. I'm like, I can't do this again, And all of a sudden, the groom's brother, another now one of my cousin-in-laws, right? He's walking around already pouring vodka into everybody's shot glass, and I'm like, I turned to my friend, and I'm like, another American. I'm like, I cannot drink another shot of vodka. And he's like, "Okay, hold on." So he poured some water into my shot glass. Right. So the cousin's coming around, he's pouring vodka. He looks at my shot glass, and he looks at, it's already liquid in there, right? He goes and he smacks the table real hard. He sees how the liquid moves in my shot glass. He's like, "That's water. Pour it out."
So he was an expert. He was an
Yeah.
expert. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I said, his name's Pavel. I said, "Pavel, I cannot have another drink today." He's like, "Don't worry." He's like, "I'm going to order you some food. You're going to eat the food, and you're going to be just fine. And you're going to be ready to drink again." So he ordered me sabove, ziemniaczki. I ate it all. And I was still kind of like, I don't know if I can really drink again. But then my now wife showed up, and she was like, "Hey, listen, her brothers were there. Hey, listen, my brothers would like to have a drink with you." Another 12 hours later, I'm being thrown with the driver again, being drove back to Białystok. It was unbelievable. Yeah, it was, like I said, a life-changing trip, to say the least.
But do you remember the wedding?
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
it was
And
a lot of fun.
what was like the biggest difference between the Polish wedding and American weddings you've seen before?
One of the things I always like to say is Poles do everything to the fullest degree. right? They work hard, they play hard, kind
Yeah.
of thing. And so the biggest difference I notice is typically when you go to an American wedding, I think everybody's so worried about how they look, like their image, so nobody really wants to get up and dance because they're worried about how they're going to look during the dance. Everybody's got their best clothes. Everybody's just trying to have a look, you know.
Yeah.
Poles, they're there to have a good time. It's been a stressful week, whatever, and they're there to let loose and let go. Um, I specifically, there's this memory burned into my brain, and I remember there was 200 something like that people at the wedding, and I remember we were on the dance floor, and I looked back at the tables, the three tables we're talking about, and there was maybe two people sitting at the tables. Everybody else was on the dance floor. Um, that was one of the big differences. Nobody cares about how they look. Everybody's there having a good time. Nobody cares, right? About if they look silly or anything like that, right?
Yeah.
That was the first big thing I noticed. The other one, obviously, is the games that get played after midnight. That was my first introduction to that. And I remember another funny story was the band was telling everybody what the games are going to be. They picked five guys from the groom side of the family, five guys from the bride side of the family. So there's 10 guys out there, right? And they broke them up into pairs. And so one of my friends gets picked. He's like this little short Indian guy, right? And so he hands me his camera. This is all back before we all had cell phones that took videos and everything like that. He actually had a camera. So he hands me his camera, and my now wife is standing next to me telling me what the band is saying, right? And they said, okay, this is a dance competition. We're going to announce some different styles of dancing, and you guys are going to do the dances. And I'm like, my eyes are lighting up, and I'm like, oh my God. Right? And they said, and the first dance style is swing dancing. And also, I pick up the camera to, oh my God, I have to record this. And my little Indian friend, he's literally being thrown up in the air by his partner. I think he did a flip while he was in the air. He came down. Oh my God.
Yeah.
And then so they did the styles, and the last thing was the final style that they had to dance was they did pole dancing, like like a stripper or whatever. So they said one guy is the pole and the other guy is the stripper dancing around him. So yeah, so big difference is, how long they go too. 12 hours. Like I said, the reception started at 4 in the afternoon, and we were leaving at 5 in the morning. How much fun everybody's, how much food there is. There's like 5 courses. There's constantly food on the table. Yeah, it's an it makes it a little bit boring now to go to American weddings, because it's like you kind of need that time to everybody to get into the groove, get some food in them, everybody get to know each other, because a lot of people don't know each other at weddings,
Yeah.
get a few drinks in. And it feels like with American weddings, right when it starts getting like good, it's done. Right? Whereas in Polish weddings, when it starts getting good, you got another 8 hours ahead of you to enjoy it.
Yeah, you have enough time. You have enough
Yeah.
time. Okay. So did you start learning Polish after you got married or before?
Slightly before. So I will say when we were flying, like I said, it was like 9 Americans that went on that first trip. All those guys they all had phrase books. They all had like the CDs, a bunch of
Oh,
for some reason, they all decided to learn, except for me. They all decided to learn Polish, right?
yeah.
As much as they could. At the end of that first trip, I could say 2 things in Polish. I could say dziękuję in Nostrovia. And I
Yeah,
kept
perfect. Perfect.
and I kept messing up which one was thank you, which one was
Which?
cheers. I was like, dziękuję. Oh no. So after that, again, this was back in 2009, 2000, end of 2009, beginning of 2010. It was just a wild year where I was like, okay, I kind of like this, this woman. But she was, at the time, she was living in London, and obviously I'm living in America. And so I would fly over to London for the weekend. I would fly in a Thursday night. I get there Friday morning, and I leave on Sunday. And I did this
Oh,
like 4 or 5 times. And after a certain amount of time, I was like, okay, I got to make it. We need to make a decision here because I can't afford to keep flying
yeah,
to you
exactly.
time, So, on one of the trips I proposed, and probably around that time when I proposed is when I decided to start learning Polish. That was probably around, it's been a long time, but it was probably around that point where I was like, okay, this is a serious relationship. The funny thing about, what made us a little bit of an atypical relationship is I met her entire family because they were all at the wedding. I met her
Yeah,
brothers, I met her parents, I met all her uncles, and I knew, all right, not most, I would say if you're over a certain age, they didn't speak any English, right? If you're basically, my wife and her brothers were like the cutoff. They all spoke English just fine because that's kind of like when my wife was in school is when communism fell and she started taking English in school. So that's why she spoke English. But before that, everybody was taking Russian. So
yeah.
above that age, nobody spoke English. So I was like, okay, well, if we're gonna do this, I need to, be able to talk to my mother-in-law, be able to talk to my father-in-law. And so decided to start learning then at that point.
And what did you do?
So I did whatever a stereotypical American does when he wants to take on a new venture. I went to figure out how much money I could spend on it first. I said,
Okay, so you did the math.
what is the most expensive thing I could do? That must be the best, right? That's a very American mentality. So I went to the bookstore, and that's back when Rosetta Stone was like the big thing, right? This is going way back to where there wasn't really that much Polish material online, just in general. You can find a lot of stuff for Spanish, French, these kind of things, but Polish was much harder. Um, so I went to the store, and I remember this moment too. And I said, yeah, they had it behind the counter, right? You couldn't just grab it off the shelf yourself because of how expensive it was. And I said, I remember, I asked the lady, I said, yeah, can you give me the Rosetta Stone, the Polish version? And she said, listen, it's like $600. And I said, well, I think my Polish fiance is going to be upset if I don't spend this money.
Yeah.
She's like, okay, okay. So that's how it started. And yeah, the other thing I noticed, even the Rosetta Stone was like limited in how much material it had in it. There was like I remember looking at Spanish and French had 5 sections total in it or something like that, and Polish only had 3. So even places that were offering Polish language option for their learning material didn't have as much material as the bigger languages. So at the beginning, it was a struggle to find, because I'm sitting in America. It's not like I'm sitting in Poland where I'm constantly getting bombarded with content. It was
Yeah.
it was tricky, and my wife then, my girlfriend at the time was living in Europe, so it was tricky at the beginning to try to find material to be able to, feed the brain basically.
What are things, books, or what do you do?
So,
You spend
uh,
600, and how much did you spend next?
so, so I'll be honest. The next thing, at some point, and I've watched like I said, I've watched all the episodes you have already, and I can express people's frustration once in a while with Polish. And I think part of my frustration is I think most of it is with myself, right? And one of the things I'm annoyed about with myself is how much time I spent trying to obtain content, trying to obtain material. Oh, this is going to be the book that solves my problems, or this is going to be the workbook. I think before maybe it was before we started working, right when we started working, I think I sent you a picture of all the different courses I had bought, all the different books I had and everything like that.
Yeah.
I don't think I've ever gone through any of them completely. Probably the most I've gone through one is, we were doing what Krakow uh, for a while. That's probably the most. Um, but what I've noticed in my many years of learning Polish is those things are helpful in that they give you more input, but you're not just gonna you're not gonna show up to a class once a week and read a workbook once in a while and obtain the language, right?
So what do you need to do then?
So what really taught me this lesson was, so at some point, right? At first I was sitting here studying by myself. Then eventually, we had to do all the visa paperwork and get up married and all that stuff. And Joanna finally moved here. And I think that one of the first things we did was the TV that I had at the time, the cable, they offered a Polish channel, TVP Polonia.
Yeah.
Right? So we got that. I think at the same time, excuse me, it was about the time when I found Real Polish, Piotr Real Polish, and all his content.
Yeah.
And so at that time, it was just kind of like, it was a lot of listening, a lot of noticing, a lot of, I think the key word is paying attention to what you're hearing, kind of thing, right? Because people can move to other countries and they can very easily never pick up the language, right? Why? Because they're not really paying attention to what they're hearing. It's just glossing over them. But I was really curious at that time. I remember at the beginning, I would see certain words and I would figure out some kind of trick about it, and then it would pique my interest. And I'm like, oh, I need to find whatever. Like, for example, the word dlaczego, right? Why? And I was like, oh, this is dla and czego, for what? Oh, another way to say for what is why, right? And so when I found that, that would give me like a huge boost of motivation, kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
But the key thing I noticed was that most of my learning came indirectly. That I wasn't actively putting it in my brain. It was getting put in their brain, another part. And the reason, how I figured that out is, so later, once we were married, once we had our daughter, and my wife spoke exclusively to her in Polish at the beginning. This was about the time where I felt comfortable saying things. I had learned enough material to be able to talk. And what everybody used to say to me at that time was, you kind of speak Polish like a 35-year-old Polish woman, right? The mannerisms and the sayings and everything like that. So it's like, okay, well, clearly the Polish that I'm picking up is what I'm hearing in my environment. And because I'm paying attention, I'm trying to understand what my wife is saying to our daughter, right? And this is the stuff that actually went into my brain. The stuff, looking at a picture on Rosetta Stone, looking at a plate and trying to remember that's a talarish, it would always drop out, right? But when my wife was telling my daughter to eat something or to sit down or to whatever it may be, right? Those things were really sticking. One, I heard them all the time, and two, it was important to me, because, like I said, it was something that my wife was saying to my daughter, and I wanted to be involved in that communication. So, but yeah, I've learned that a lot of the Polish that I actually know, like I said, I didn't directly put into my brain myself. It got put in there because I happened to be living in a Polish type environment, paying attention, trying to notice, and my brain was like, oh, this must be important to him. And it stuck, basically.
Yeah. And did she use Polish with your daughter from the same beginning?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
So because at the beginning, so my wife she's a teacher, but she took like 2 years, a year and a half, 2 years off, something like that, to be home with my daughter. And so she spoke exclusively to her in Polish, and then I was speaking exclusively to her in English at the beginning. Okay. And I think too, this was like the perfect environment for somebody who's learning Polish to come up in, right? Because here's my daughter and she's picking up the language and she's speaking very simple words. It's not like you're talking to adults. So eventually I had to take advantage of this, and I started speaking to my daughter in Polish. The big thing was, we had loads of children's books. My wife, every time we go to Poland once a year. And so every year we go to Poland, people would hand us a bunch of books. We had tons of them. I think we've since donated them to Polish schools, but we had lots of them. And so every night you're reading books to your daughter, my daughter. Um, and some days she would pick the English books, and some days she would pick the Polish books or the English books, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And I remember at the beginning going, okay, I don't really know. I didn't understand what it said, right? And I was just kind of like looking at the pictures and making up a story in English about what it said, right? And as we were going, then I started then I started understanding what it was saying, and I was translating it to English because she didn't want me speaking in Polish. She was like, no,
Okay.
no, mom speaks Polish, dad speaks English.
Okay.
And so there was, but it was, like I said, it was a very good tool. I was reading like very simple books. Was the biggest one, my daughter's name is Zosha, so we had like Zosha Samosha, and we were
Yeah.
these books. So she had those, and yeah, like I said, eventually reached the point where she kind of allowed me once in a while to speak Polish to her, and people would ask her, what language does your mom speak? My mom speaks Polish. What language does your dad speak? My dad speaks English and Polish. She had no idea that my wife spoke English. Or at least probably she wasn't paying attention when my wife was speaking. My wife and I speak primarily in English to each other, but I guess she wasn't really paying attention to those moments. And she had no idea for the longest time that her mom spoke English.
What does your wife teach?
So she teaches toddlers. She's a Montessori teacher. She teaches toddlers.
Okay.
So it's interesting because a lot of it is like she ends up teaching like a lot of life skills. Like the way the Montessori school works is at the beginning there's a lot of like hands-on things, doing physical movements, just kind of getting the basics in first before you move on to more, traditional kind of school material and everything like that. So it was funny when so my daughter went to the school with her. Um, so I would show up once in a while to observe, and I was joking because they were like cleaning the tables, they were scrubbing the floors, they were, doing all this kind of like manual labor kind of thing. And I was like, I see what's going on in this school. I'm like, all you teachers get to sit around and let the kids do all the work, cleaning everything up. But then eventually my daughter got old enough and they connected the dots for me and showing me, because they did this, and then it leads to this, then eventually leads to them, being good at math skills and everything. I forget exactly the dots, but it was very interesting to see how it progressed between being good at doing things with your hands first, and then that turned into, okay, now we're going to use this tool, which was actually a math tool, but because they're good at manipulating with their hands, and now, okay, now we can show you what you do with this tool, and you do this, and then it helps you do math, kind of thing, right? And so it's like this very neat progression. I'd never seen anything like it before, but it's cool.
Yeah, it's very interesting.
Yeah.
Can you tell me more about this method?
I maybe the most I could tell you. I remember if my wife was here, she'd give you a whole dissertation on it. But
Yeah, of course.
the other thing too is the other key thing too is it's very personalized. Everybody moves at their own speed, right? So it's basically they have so many different pieces of material in the classroom for different lessons and everything like that. And everybody moves either when they show an interest in it or when they're ready for it. And then, if a kid shows an interest in something, teacher will be like, okay, come here, and I'll show this to you. And then if they continue showing interest in it, then eventually they're allowed to use that, whatever that thing is, on their own, kind of thing, right? So they kind of progress at their own pace. The other key thing to it is there's multiple age groups in the same classroom. So eventually what happens is the older kids will start working with the younger kids. Instead of just the teacher teaching you everything, they say one of the best ways to know something is to teach it, right?
Exactly,
And so
exactly.
that's what they'll do eventually is once an older kid has something really down and a younger kid shows interest, the teacher will do the initial showing the younger kid what to do, but then eventually the older kids will be teaching the younger kids, kind of thing, just to, it teaches the younger kid. They'll probably react more positively to another child showing them something. And it
Yeah,
reinforces what the older child has learned because now they're teaching it.
yeah, yeah. It sounds really, really good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we found my daughter switched to traditional public elementary school 2 years ago.
Yeah.
And we found once she switched, we were kind of nervous, like, how's this going to go? Like, because taking tests and grades and, all this, how's it going to go? And she found, especially when she first got there, she was like, oh, this is all stuff I already learned a while ago. This is all easy stuff. It's like
Yeah.
now school is starting to catch back up to her a little bit. Of course, that's going to happen. She's not going to stay ahead of everybody forever. But when she first got there, it was a very comfortable transition for her because most of the stuff she'd already learned.
Yeah. 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 Um, so let's talk a little bit about the USA.
Okay.
What states have you lived in?
What states have I lived in? So I
Yeah.
was I was born in New York State, not the
Yeah.
not the city.
Yeah.
So I was born up in upstate New York, kind of near, there's the Great Lakes. There's the five lakes there that kind of divide Canada and America. I lived 10 miles from Lake Ontario, so pretty close up there. And then when I graduated from college, I got a job in New Jersey. And now I live in New Jersey, and I moved around New Jersey 3 or 4 times. I've lived in different parts of New Jersey's. It's much different than when you grow up in upstate New York and you have a thought of what New Jersey is like, right? It's not a very positive thought, or anything like that. And then I remember, actually, this is a funny story from Poland. The first trip I went to Poland, we were looking for something on the TV that we could watch, something in English.
Yeah.
And I remember we found MTV and Jersey Shore was on. And I remember turning to my friend, I'm like, oh my God, this is what they see about us.
Yes, that's true.
So I have lived kind of like near the shore. I did live in there. Now I live more out in the mountains and everything like that. I've moved away from the east coast of near New York City. New Jersey is very crowded, very New York City like, and I lived there for a while. But then during COVID, we decided like it was a fine life, but my wife grew up in, well, kind of like the country of Poland, right? My wife grew up in Podlasie. I grew up in more of a country type environment. And so during COVID just kind of made us realize, let's go start living the life we really want to live. And so we were living in this very crowded townhouse type environment. And now we moved out to the country. We're very close to Pennsylvania now. And it's completely different here than it was like back over there.
Okay. What's the biggest difference between these two states?
They're so close together that there's a lot in common with them. There's
Yeah.
what we call it here. We call it the tri-state area, which is Connecticut, New Jersey, and New York. But the reason why I made the distinction at the beginning about where I lived, right, is because most people say, where were you born? I say New York. Most people just assume New York City, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
to be honest with you, most of us who live in the state itself, not the city, have a disdain for New York City kind of thing, because it's completely different than the rest of the state. Um, and but so it's a lot of farmland. It's a lot of both my families. My dad's side of the family had a dairy farm up there. My mom's side of the family had a vegetable farm up there. So it's almost all of it is just a lot of farmland, which is complete opposite in New York City kind of thing. There's a lot of mountains up there. It's beautiful up there. New Jersey's interesting. I would say the big difference from where I grew up in New York and New Jersey is because we're closer to New York City. You have a lot of immigrants here. A lot of people who either are immigrants who have had immigrants in their family line come here, right? So the one thing I can say about New Jersey, very positive, is everything is here. You want a certain type of food, you want a certain type of experience, anything, it's very similar to New York City in this way, that you can go have it, and it's not like you're eating like you want Mexican food, let's say. you can go to a place where, the babcha, the Mexican babcha is sitting in the back actually cooking it. It's authentic food. It's one of the things that it's changed now a lot in Poland. But when I first started going to Poland, it was one of the things I struggled with, and that I'm used to eating so many different types of food every night, like just variety all the time. And like, back when I first started going to Poland, it was pretty much, well, you're eating Polish food every night. And I love Polish food. But like, I'm there for 2 weeks. And after 2 weeks, I'm like, I could really go for a burrito, or I could really go for some, Tex-Mex or a steak or, just something. Like I said, I'm so used to not eating the same food every night because of where I live, that it was difficult at the beginning, going, oh my God, Polish food again. kind of thing, It's definitely changed now. There's definitely a lot more variety in Poland. There's been a huge amount of changes in Poland since I first started going there. That was actually one of the things that interests me about Robert's interview, because he's been going to Poland since even before I was going there. And I've seen, like I said, the first time I went there was 2009. I've seen a tremendous amount of changes, but I'm sure it pales in comparison to what he's seen.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Are there any like different accents or dialects between these two states, or people just speak exactly the same English? What do you think?
I would say it's actually interesting, because yesterday my daughter and I were watching a movie. I'm trying to show her some of the movies that were important to me when I was a kid, right?
Yeah.
And so we were watching, I don't know if you've seen it, the Karate Kid.
Yeah, I have.
So we were watching that. In the very beginning of the movie, he's in Newark, New Jersey, and then he's moving out to California, right? And you hear them talking in the beginning of the movie, and I'm like, and my daughter's like, why are they talking like that? What is that? I'm like, that's a stereotypical New Jersey accent. That's what New Jersey people sounded like, And it almost feels like, maybe because of the internet, maybe just simply because how people move around these days compared to generations ago, right? It feels like accents have really gotten diluted compared to where they used to be. Like, there used to be a very distinct New York City accent, or a Brooklyn accent, or a New Jersey accent. And people say I have an accent. I have an upstate New York accent. I don't hear it, but people say it. But it feels like I said, it feels like that is like gotten diluted compared to what it used to be. Nobody really has such a strong accent like they used to, kind of thing. Probably, like I said, probably some of it is just people moving around so much, myself included. Yeah. I think a lot of it too is just the internet. People hear things. I'm sure, like, one of the things I found interesting when I first started learning Polish was how some Poles want to learn British English, or speak like they do in England, and some people want to learn American English and speak like Americans do and everything like that. So the fact that we all have access to all of this, kind of like, it feels like the entire world is some kind of like melting pot right now with everybody's accents and everything like that.
What about Polish accents? What accents have you heard? Do you hear any big difference, especially in Podlasie?
There's definitely, I will say, no matter how many people I speak with, Polish people, I will never understand anybody as well as I do Podlasie people. Like I said, it's the one I've heard the most. It's purely because of that.
They are your people,
right? And I don't even know how many distinct accents I've heard, but I know when somebody's from Podlasie. I'll say that. I know there's the Podlasie accent. I know there's all the other accents, kind of thing. And so sometimes, we have a lot of Polish friends here from, all over Poland, and there's some people I can understand them just fine, and there's some people, they can say Cześć to me, and I'm like, what did you say? They tell me, I don't know if I've reached a level where I really notice it too much. They also tell me that people from Podlasie, specifically with certain phrases, have a different way of speaking. I guess, like, they use, like, sometimes where you'd use me, mi. They use like de la Meunier, or
Yeah,
they interchange them, something like that. And
yeah.
so then that's another one. Like, originally people were telling me I speak Polish like a 35-year-old Polish woman, but then they were saying, no, you speak like you're somebody from Podlasie, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So yeah, it's definitely. And then what was the other one? I think it was Kelly, was because she's been to Białystok, and
Yes,
I think I
yes.
mentioned this you after that after that episode. The older dialect that she was talking about. My father-in-law and some of the older folks do that. Specifically, the thing I noticed the most is they take the w and they put a
Mm-hmm.
li, and
Yes,
that's the big
yes.
change. And like I remember the first time not the first time I heard, but the first time it's the difference between the first time you hear something and the first time you notice something, right? And I remember the first time I noticed it, and I was like, "What?" And I was like, "What's that?" And I turned to my wife, and she's like, "That's how they that's how they
That's how
talk."
they speak. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's how they. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah.
But there was some, what was that? The thing that I don't think I'll ever be able to understand is, the movie Sami Svoj. I don't know how
Yeah.
many times I've tried to watch that. I can't understand anything they're saying on that one.
Oh, this is a very special and old Polish language.
Yeah,
So
yeah. It's one of those. I
yeah,
remember when my wife first moved here, I think she brought a bunch of movies with her, and then like her cousins, or we'd have her cousins over, and we would play the movies. So I saw a lot of those movies from the beginning. I saw Sex Misia and Sami Svoj and
yeah.
King Size. I'd say I think my love of Poland has more to do with the culture than it, and it's like learning Polish has been a byproduct of that, And I think like it's the same kind of thing when you have an interest in what you're paying attention to, or you have like a love or whatever, right? You just kind of the language comes along for the ride. You kind of pick up the language automatically. Um,
Where does this love come from?
we've been trying to figure that out for the longest time. I think a lot of it is so. Um, my so the immigrants in my mom's side of the family are my grandparents, right? My grandfather came from Sicily when he was 7 years old, and
Yeah.
he's been cutting hair since he was 8 years old, something like that, right? And
Oh,
so it's another one of those ways where the more I've gotten out in America, the more I've talked to other people, the more I've moved away. Once I moved away from my home environment, that I was raised very European, in the European style, right? Because I had direct access to the immigrants, kind of thing, right? And
yeah.
a lot of things that are just kind of like American, like stereotypical American, it just doesn't resonate with me always. So, but then what happened was, right? I'm like the stereotypical, this is a very stereotypical American movie type, where I'm the kid who grew up in the small town saying, I'm better than this place. I need to break out of here, right? I don't want anything to do with all these family traditions and everything like that. So I graduated from college and I moved, right? And I was just trying to do everything that was um, not, what I grew up with, basically, right? And eventually then what always happens in those movies, right, is you come back, you realize, oh yeah, that stuff was good, that stuff was nice, right? Some of it is, hey, where I live now, I live more in the country than I do in the city, even though I'm in New Jersey. And so I think about the time I came to that realization is when I went to Poland, when not so much for the wedding, but the other trips, the next trips, right? Once we were engaged and married and everything like that, right? And we would go out to the village, and we have like a typical day out in the village where you're grilling, everybody's they're playing music, everybody's talking, everybody's just hanging out and everything like that. And it reminded me so much of what I had when I was a kid, right? I don't think Europeans really understand how similar they are. They think, everybody's like the similarities between Poles and Italians, and I'm like, there's a Europeanness that unites everybody, kind of thing, right? There's a way of living, there's a way of thinking. It's very not American, basically, right? And I remember it just always really resonated with me. People ask me all the time, we don't understand why you like Poles so much. And I'm like, I get it, right? Like there's just so much, I can find so many similarities between the
Yeah.
two. And I don't think my wife really understood until she moved here. And then we went up to where my family all lives, and there was like a traditional party and everything like that. No vodka, but she at that point is when she saw the similarities, and she was like, okay, she's like, I understand now. I get now why you like us, you like the environment so much, right? Probably has a lot to do too. Like I said, it was Polache, just that region is very similar to how I grew up in, very similar, say, to the countryside in Italy kind of thing. I think there was just it was the right place at the right time kind of thing, right? It was
Yes.
the right area that I was going to. I could have gone to Warsaw or Krakow or something like that, and it wouldn't have resonated with me. It was like a perfect match.
Yeah.
It's
So
still one of
what?
those things when I go to Warsaw or where I go to Krakow, it doesn't really feel like Poland to me to the same degree that Podlasie does, right? Like Warsaw, when I go to Warsaw, I think, okay, it's a big city. Like New York
Yeah.
City is a big city, you know. When I went to Krakow is amazing in terms of, nothing was destroyed during World War II to the same degree Warsaw was. So there's so much history, there's so much stuff there to see. But there's so much English. There's so many tourists. There's so many British people there. Um, and I'm like, I'm not used to being in Poland where this many people are speaking English. It has changed a little bit since Brexit, and a lot of these people have come back with their spouses that they married in England and stuff like that. But there was
Yeah.
times when the first, I don't know, 5 to 10 years I was going to Poland. When I was in Białystok, I felt like I was the only foreigner within 100 miles. And so all of a sudden when I was sitting in Krakow, and I'm like, this is weird. It's like being in Disney World kind of thing. It's just full of tourists. Whereas the other city I've been in is Gdańsk. And I noticed that's where if foreigners come to Poland and travel to Krakow, when Poles go on vacation, they go to Gdańsk. And I was there once a couple summers ago, and that was just all full of Polish people on vacation.
Yeah. So a few years ago, you came up with this ingenious idea to start a YouTube channel so
Yeah.
you can improve your Polish.
Yep.
Can you tell me more about this?
Sure. So, for the longest time, like I said, I was studying Polish by myself in my house, studying by myself. My wife will tell you she didn't really help me at all, right? I would say if I'm going to give Polish advice learning advice to anybody is don't count on your spouse to explain anything to you because they probably don't even know the answer themselves, right? If she asks me a question about English, I'm like, I don't know. That's just how it is,
Now
right?
Polish women now will block my YouTube channel.
It's funny because all the time, like we were just at a party last weekend and people were like, "Yo, she made you to learn Polish," and she's always like, "I didn't make him do anything. This is all him." She's like, "I didn't even help him. This is all him." So, anyways, eventually I reached the point where I was like, first of all, I had no idea what my level was. I had no idea if I was actually learning anything, because I was doing everything just isolated by myself, right? So I did about 3 steps around this time, right? The first thing I did was I found there was a Polish cultural foundation, kind of near my house, and they offered Polish classes. And so I'm like, all right, let me go there and check it out. And so I think I wrote to them first and saying, hey, do you guys offer classes? Yeah. They're like, we have a beginning class and an advanced class. Which one do you want to be in? I'm like, I have no idea.
Yeah.
I'm like, so they're like, all right, well, they're like, the advanced class is on break right now. So come and spend a couple times at the basic class and see if you see them. See if it matches what you need. I said, okay. So I go in there and they're like, they had pictures on the piece of paper. What is this? Con. What is this? PS. And I'm like, okay, I know all this stuff. I was the one that's sitting
Yeah.
in the front going, I know the answer. I know. Oh, I know the answer. So I'm like, all right, this is too easy for me. So then the advanced class started up again, and so I'm like, all right. I was nervous. It's in the name, advanced. I'm like, I never, there's one thing about probably that will unite all Polish learners is that we always have self-doubt about how good we
Oh
actually are,
yeah, absolutely.
right?
Yes.
And so when I hear advanced, I'm like, I'm screwed. And so I walked into that class, and the teacher says, "Okay, we have a new student. Would you like to introduce yourself?" She said this in English, and I said, "Okay. Do you want me to introduce myself in Polish or English?" She's like, "Whatever is comfortable for you." And I said, "Okay. Dzień dobry, mam na imię Filip, mieszkam w New Jersey, uczę się polskiego, bo moja żona jest Polką." And I remember one of the other students just goes, "Whoa."
Oh, is this the new teacher or the new student? Yeah. He came to teach us.
And so I'm like, okay. I'm like, I guess I'm kind of good for the advanced class too. And I remember like it was like a 3-hour class, something like that.
And
We have
do you need teachers? Do you need teachers?
And so what happened was, there was like a bathroom break in the middle of the class, and a teacher left, and then some other Polish woman come over, and she's like, "Excuse me." She's like, "I heard there's an American down here that speaks really good Polish. Could you say something to me in Polish?" And I'm like, okay, maybe I'm better than I think I am. I don't know, right? So I said, so that kind of gave me a little bit of a boost,
Oh
right?
yeah, this was a great book. Yeah.
Yeah. And so then I'm like, all right, well, let's expand this, let's go to the next level. And that's when I created the channel. I think originally I had started going on some of these apps where like iTalki, I think Hello Talk was specifically the app, right? Where you can
Yeah.
have conversations with people. And, everybody say it. One thing I appreciate again about your students is at that time I could never find anybody as crazy as me, right? Everybody was just doing everything at a very surface level, and I can feel when I'm watching these other interviews, right? The same level of obsession, and a lot of these people, and I was just everybody would like have a quick, couple minute conversation. Okay, that's it. Thank you. Goodbye. Right. So it wasn't really fulfilling me at all. And I said, fine, I'm gonna make a channel. I think there was some challenges on there about speaking. People are trying to make challenges, speak Polish every day, right? Speak for a minute every day in Polish and make a recording of yourself. And I said, I'm gonna go do it on the internet, right? And so I think at that time I created the channel. I made maybe 3 or 4 videos or something. It was very early, and that's when you put up a message on Hello Talk.
Yeah.
That you were looking for people. I think you were still studying at that point or something like that.
Yeah.
And looking for people to work with. And I was like, I'm like, I'll work with you. I'm like, here's my sample work, I guess we'll say, right?
Yeah.
And then you were like, yeah, let's do it. Let's go, So I like, it's one of those things now. I didn't think it at the time. The fact that, like Robert said, that this is the longest conversation you and I have ever had in English, that I went from, like I said, teaching myself in America with nothing really, no real Polishness around me to help me out or anything like that, other than my wife, other than the conversation between my wife and my daughter, right? I took maybe a handful of classes at that time, and to walk in with a tutor, and we just spoke Polish from day one. Like I said, I didn't realize at the time, but I'm like, man, that's kind of, I can pat myself on the back a little bit, right? If I can be a little not humble about something, I'm like, man, that's pretty, I don't want to say impressive, because I don't think it's that impressive, but it's like, it's something to say, wow, I did that kind of thing,
Yeah, it was, for me, it was really impressive. Yeah, I remember when I, watched your videos, and I was like, wow, this guy really wants to learn. This is so, motivational, and this is so inspiring, and
yeah. So
yeah.
it was I would say it was a lot of fun at the beginning. I had to stop it last year, because for me, the meaning of it changed, right? And at the beginning, it was just like, it's one of those, it was a blessing and a curse. And at the beginning, it was just, I just want to say something. I'm not really talking. Most of the Polish I was doing was input, and I felt like I could understand way better than I can speak, right? And so this was a way to get output, basically, right? And I'm like, I don't care if
Yeah,
anybody watches
yeah.
it. I just want to practice speaking, you know? But what happened was the channel started taking off, right?
Yes, yes, yes.
And then once it started taking off, I started getting, it became less about me aiding me learn Polish, and it became more about typical YouTube type stuff, entertaining people. Um, and I started like doing like little things here and there. Where like, okay, I want to talk about this topic. Instead of talking about things that I want to talk about, I was talking about things where I think they want to talk about, right? And then I started doing some videos in English.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
there was one that really broke my brain because I did one on Polish Independence Day. And I just, I was like, I just feel the need to say something to Poles on their Independence Day, right? And I sat down, I didn't even make a script, I didn't do anything. I just sat down and recorded this video talking about like how amazing Poland is, how, all the Polish people that helped me through the years, and you know, you're all great. That's basically was the message, right? And that video, I can't remember the last time. It was like 30,000, 35,000 views or something like that, right? And I got
Yeah.
all kinds of subscribers coming in, and I'm like, and then it just became like, okay, well, now I need to do things in service of these people instead of in service of my Polish, right? And I did that for a while, and eventually I kind of realized it. I'm like, I'm not doing this for the right reasons anymore. This is probably hurting my Polish more than it's actually helping it at that point, right? So at that
Yeah,
point, yeah, at that point I was like, all right, it was more feeding my ego, is another thing, right? It was just like, oh my God, look at this American who speaks Polish, right? Giving me probably a bigger head than I actually need. One of the things that helps when you're learning things is to stay humble, right? I was feeling like, when I didn't think I knew anything, it was driving me more to do anything. That when you kind of feel like you get a little bit of a big head, it makes you a little bit lazy, kind of thing, right? And so I kind of cut it at that point, and I was like, that's it, we're done. And
yeah. I think the algorithms chose different path for you.
yeah,
But initially, I think it really helped you, and
yeah, I think
it was very good idea.
that first year of that year specifically of you, I was working with you, and that first year of the channel, that was, yeah, it was a tremendous amount of growth then at that point, right?
Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
just picking up, like, I'm very good at, I think as a result, I'm very good at like everyday conversation, right? You kind of drift outside that into specific fields, like you're talking about medicine, you're talking about politics, or about, lawyer stuff, and I'm like, I don't know, but like I can sit down and have an everyday conversation with people, and I think a lot of that was just me talking about whatever random thing I wanted to talk about on the YouTube video. And what I really liked about our classes was it was an hour long. We'd spend half of it just you and I having a conversation, talking about what happened to us in the past week since the last time we talked and everything like that, right?
yeah, yeah.
And I probably got more out of that half than I did the grammar conjugations in the second half. I think I remember there was a couple times where you and we just went the full hour just sitting around talking, and it was just like, oops, we forgot to actually study Polish this week. But like, I'd come back from Poland and I just have an hour's worth of stuff to tell you, and we just sat, and it was, and like, in the end, that's the goal of learning the language, right? Is to be able
Exactly. Yeah.
to communicate with people. So the fact that I could do it, the fact that I can go on this 2 week vacation, still come home and have an hour long conversation with you, like I would say I didn't even view you as my tutor at that point. I just viewed you as my friend who I'm sitting here telling about how my trip just was, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
that would, like, those kind of moments when you're relaxed, when you're having a good time, that's when it just flows. It flows out of your mouth. The stuff comes in. It's like perfect harmony at that point.
Yeah. Um, I need to ask you this question, so I'll do it. Totally different topic, but
Yeah.
still important to the world. Why do you think Donald Trump won the elections?
I think so right now how it works in this country is it's pretty much divided down the middle, right? Half the people think one thing, half the people think another thing. I think what a lot of our politicians don't realize, maybe because they're living in a bubble, and they're only surrounding themselves with people who hear what they want to hear. I think when one side, it doesn't matter which side, when one side goes what the other side feels is too far into their direction, that's when the other side shows up. Like historically, Americans don't really show up to vote to the same degree as other countries, right? But if they feel motivated to vote, they will get out and vote, right? And so if they feel now that the other side is going, oh, we're going too far. I think America. I think most Americans will maybe most Americans will admit it, and I think a lot of people on each extreme elements don't want to admit it, but they probably know it's true. That most people just kind of want to be in the middle, right? Most people want to be balanced in the middle. And if you feel it's being pulled, whichever way, if you feel it's being pulled in one direction too hard, the other side is going to show up. They're motivated to vote at that point, and they're going to show up. And I feel at this point they felt like Kamala was too much of a candidate that was going to take that they were going to be pulled. Either they were already being pulled too far, or they're going to continue to be pulled much further, say like to the left in this case, than they really wanted to be. Right. I think it's the same case when Trump lost, because now they felt like they're being pulled too far to the right. Right. And that motivated the other side to show up and vote. So I think politicians could do more to play a longer game, right? They feel like, okay, I'm in power. I'm only in power for 2 years, 4 years, whatever it is. I need to hurry up and get all my agenda in, right? I'm sure we're going to see backlash now to how quickly Trump is trying to do everything that he's doing, especially if he doesn't work out as perfectly as he claims it's going to be, right? Everybody's going to feel like they're pulled too far, and now the other side is going to show up, right? People like change, but not drastic change. And if people feel like whether it's true or not, whether the change is drastic or not, if they feel like it's drastic change, they're going to show up and say, hit the brakes. This is not the direction I want to be heading in.
And what do you think about Elon Musk? Is he like, yeah?
It's hard to say,
Controversial.
Yeah, and it's hard to get I'll say it's hard to get an accurate reading on him. I would say because he's just so. Everything is just. It feels like I can't feel like a lot of times you can read somebody and you can get a feel about what their ultimate goal is, kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
And I don't always have the feel that I really understand what he's really going after, kind of thing.
No, he's going after Mars.
Well, that's the thing. But then what does politics have to do with Mars, kind of thing, right? Like it just feels like a lot of it is like you could perceive it as like a power trip. He's just like, he's kind of dipped his toes in this thing, and now he likes the attention. He likes the, similar to like when my Polish channel was taking off, right? You feel the admiration, you feel the power, and it kind of goes to your head a little bit, right? And I don't know. It just feels like when he was the guy who made PayPal, or the guy who made Tesla, or the guy who made SpaceX, right? That was like a different person than this current person.
Yeah, true.
And so it's tough now. And it's like such a dramatic change. Let's say since he bought Twitter, that it's tough to get an accurate reading on him now, because it just feels like he's got his toes in so many different things that he's just kind of all over the place, and it's hard to get a real accurate reading on him,
But what do you think about his like technical side, which is probably the best side, the better side? Like,
I don't know. I don't know. Like he takes credit for a lot of things, but I'm an engineer. I'm a software engineer. I know that one man doesn't make something, you know? And
Yeah.
I'm curious if he takes credit for a lot of stuff that his actual team did. Because a lot of times people in that position of power, that's what it is. They'll sit there and say, I did this, I did that, I did this. And in some degrees they're right in that, like for example, like Steve Jobs, um, his drive, his vision allowed Apple to become he pushed the engineers. He pushed them to do something that they didn't think that was possible or anything like that, right? Because he just had a vision and he wanted it to happen. And sometimes when as a CEO, when you demand something hard enough, the engineers can actually deliver, kind of thing, right? So in terms of him being in charge of companies, he's definitely done things like this, right? He's what they do with SpaceX, I still feel like I'm watching science fiction when I see those rockets land, or when I see the arms now capturing the rockets and landing. I'm like, there's two things I think in that moment. I'm like, I'm watching a movie right now. I'm not watching real life. The second thing I think is I watch all those engineers who cheer when it happens, and I'm like, I will never have that level of satisfaction with my work as those guys do, because that's like the ultimate thrill. Um, but I wonder how much of it is just him demanding things of his engineers and them delivering, or maybe he has the ability to hire the right people and get the best out of them, or whether he's actually sitting down there writing code, changing things. Really, I don't know. I'm sure it's a little bit of both, but I don't know how much of it is actually his technical ability and how much of it is actually his leadership skills, let's say.
And have you tried Grok 3?
I have not. I think the only one I've used is ChatGPT at this point. Of course,
Perfect.
in support of of learning Polish. I'll ask it a
Yeah.
bunch of Polish stuff. I've tried to get it to have a conversation with me in Polish. That's another one of the things, because Polish isn't that popular language. A lot of times it takes, Siri still doesn't speak Polish.
Yeah.
It's tough sometimes to get it to do those things. But I would say this: I find it a useful tool for learning a language. In that, going back to what I was saying previously, one of the trickiest things about learning a language is finding something that you're interested in general, right? They always tell you, hey, just find something you like doing and do it in that language, right? So I'd say, why as I've been learning Polish, one of the mismatches I have is I have some interesting things that just aren't popular in Poland, let's say. Like, it's an example, like baseball, let's say, for example, right? American baseball. You're not finding any Polish material about baseball, right? Or even
Yeah.
even Apple. I have an interest in like Steve Jobs, Apple, the history of the company and everything like that, right? You're not really finding too much out there, right? But I can tell ChatGPT, hey, make me a story at this level, B1 level about baseball, and it spits it out, right?
Yeah.
And then, or sometimes I've done things like I'll be down in the gym. Hey, give me a list of vocabulary words for the gym, and they'll give me a list of words. Okay, now give me a story that uses those words at this level, and it does it. Who knows how accurate it is? I mean, Google Translate and DeepL and everything like those are sometimes not 100% accurate. As you say to me
Yeah.
sometimes when I speak, you're like, technically that's correct what you're saying, but that's a Polish person would never say that.
Yeah.
Would never say it that way. That's what you say.
That way,
But
yeah.
but it's more content, and it's interesting content for you, and that's the key, right? Like, a lot of, like, I've tried watching movies in Poland. A lot of them are a little too dark for me. There's like Pitbull, or like a lot of these like more dark movies, let's call them. They're just not
Yeah.
my style. So like it's hard for me to like watch movies, let's say, in Poland, be able to get the content. Um, but I can more easily tailor what I'm learning with like something like AI. So in that case, it makes it a useful tool to use.
And do you think AI is going to replace jobs like yours and mine?
I don't know. Well, probably eventually,
Yeah.
right? The question is when. When ChatGPT originally came out, everybody's talking about that we're all out of jobs in 6 months, you know? And and specifically the people who are saying it were a lot of people who aren't really technical, don't really understand what's going on, you know? And the thing I always used to say at that time was, look, Elon's been working on cars that drive themselves for how many years now? 15 years, 14, 15 years, something like that.
Yeah,
Cars
yeah.
still aren't driving themselves. I'm like, that's one thing. Now imagine you're trying to replace, how many different things do I do in a day, let's say for my job, right? And now you're trying to replace all those things. And you think it's going to happen in 6 months? Maybe eventually we'll get there. The other thing that I would say this, the other thing that kind of gives me pause is we us as humans have created a lot of things, right? And most of the time, it's good. It's never as good as the original product, right? Like we make food. It's like in America, we manufacture a lot of food, human designed food, right? Probably not as healthy for you as, pulling what grows in nature naturally, let's say, right? It's close, it's not really there kind of thing, right? It's always a little off. And so the question I would have is, okay, if we're always a little off on, we never can quite replace science and nature 100%. It's not an exact duplication. What happens when we try to replace humans, the human brain and everything, something that we really don't really understand completely anyways. We never really completely understand the brain, and we're trying to replace it. I don't know if it's going to be as easy as we think it's going to be.
Oh, very interesting. Very interesting. And I agree with you, yeah. You said very interesting things. I didn't even think about them from that perspective. But very optimistic. Very optimistic. Very
In the end
optimistic.
of the day, everything's gonna be fine, right? In the end of the, as much as people complain about how the world is and complain about this, complain about that, we still live in much safer, much more wealthy. You're always living in the best times of humanity, more or less. Everything's in general. You may not
Yeah.
feel it on a daily basis, but in general, things are always getting better. So we'll see.
Yeah.
The other question I would have just quickly on that other topic is, I would wonder if we really could replace humans in completely in the workplace. What happens to society at that point, right? I think everybody thinks, it's like that movie Up, right? You've seen that one where the humans are all just sitting in their chairs watching TV, sipping on their Slurpee drinks. And for some people, especially in this modern age we live in, this age of convenience that we live in, I think some people that's like, oh, that's great. I never have to go to work. But I wonder what happens to people when it's like, be careful what you wish for kind of thing,
Yeah,
right?
if they never have to go to work, they will just learn Polish all day.
Yeah. Well, then they wouldn't even want to learn Polish, right? Because there'll be some tool that can automatically translate for them and everything like that. That's one of the things I kind of get annoyed with when I see like these automatic translating tools. I'm like, learn it yourself. I'm like, as I said, the journey, the fun is in the journey, right? The fun
Yeah.
is not in the destination. And all these things that, how many years I've been learning Polish, all these experiences that I had, there's just, I couldn't, we could talk for another hour, right? At least about all the moments that I've had that I stick in my head, and it's all purely because I learned Polish. I wouldn't have had any of them if you could just, like Neo in the Matrix, just go, oh, I know Polish.
Okay, let's switch to Polish.
Okay.
Co robiłeś dzisiaj?
Dzisiaj, teraz spotkamy się. Wcześniej byłem w kościele. Byłem tam o 8 rano.
Tak.
I teraz teraz moja żona i córka są też w kościele, a potem oni pójdą do sklepu
Tak,
spoczywy.
okej. Co muszą kupić?
Warzywa, zwykle
Tak,
jajka, które
tak.
są bardzo drogie dzisiaj. Ale
Tak.
wiesz, jajek są bardzo ważne e, na polski posiłek.
Tak, tak, tak,
No
tak.
i też musimy przygotować, bo czwartek jest tłusty czwartek. Tak.
O,
I
tak, faktycznie, faktycznie.
no, środę będziemy robić pączki
Tak,
i faworki. No.
tak.
I no, jest niedzielę. Po prostu muszę relaksować trochę. No.
Okej, 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 okej. Um, so like, what was the best place you think you visited in Poland?
I would say it's tough. It's one of those. I will always tell you my heart is in Białystok, right? That doesn't mean it's perfect. And the more I go there, the more I see the flaws. But it's always going to be that way, right? But the place that was like, wow, I could really spend some time here was Gdańsk. Gdańsk is it was very relaxed. It's near the water. You know, I've always, like I mentioned to you beginning of this interview, I grew up near Lake Ontario. And then when I moved down here, I lived near the Atlantic Ocean. So I've always kind of lived, this is now the furthest I've ever lived away from water, a large body of water. And so just being in that environment, you know, around the water and everything like that, it feels comfortable to me. And it also felt like a very relaxed town compared to the other. Maybe it's because mostly people who are there are on vacation. Most of the people who are around were there on vacation. But that city really resonated with me, and I would, probably want to go and experience it a little bit more. But for me, like, same time, I'm a country kid. I'm not a city kid. So when I really need to find peace, I'll say, I go out into the country. I go out into the villages, and even then, we'll go out to the village, and I'll just go for a walk out in the countryside. And the Polish countryside is one of the most beautiful places I've ever seen. You know, and it's just like you go out there, and there's a specific path that I walk on, and there's always the farmer, and he's working on his land. There's the church there that, every hour you hear the bells ring and everything like that. Every once in a while, a car goes by. It's mostly dirt roads and everything. I remember once I recorded for the channel, I recorded a video out there. I was just walking down one of the roads, and I was just so relaxed. It's very comfortable for me to be out there. There's something I would say this. So since like I said, I'm an engineer, and this is something I think you talked. I can't remember who it was. Maybe it was Robert. I definitely believe in this multiple personalities when you learn another language, right? And so I
Yeah,
have the English brain, I have the Polish brain. Maybe for people who have Polish roots, it's not as because it's already part of this main brain kind of thing. But since I didn't, it's another brain, right? And
it
there's
is.
just certain things, like I said, I have a very engineering brain on my English brain. And I've noticed I'm much more emotional on my Polish brain, especially when I'm out there. I relax. I have the highest of highs. I have the lowest of lows. There's been places out in the village where I'm just kind of walking and I'll just start getting tears in my eyes, right? Just because of what I'm looking at and what I'm feeling, what I'm experiencing, everything like that, right? Same thing with music in Poland. I don't get goosebumps. My wife, that's a Polish thing, showing you your goosebumps all the time, right? When they hear music.
Yeah.
I don't get any of that in English when I listen to American songs. When I listen to certain Polish songs, same thing. I remember once I was watching The Voice of Poland, and they had a guy on there, and they had him sing a song, and they're like, "Okay, that's okay. Could you sing us a song?" They always, people sing in English. They ask, "Can you sing us a song in Polish?" Right? And so he wrote one of his own songs, and I remember he started singing a song. He wrote a song about the fact that his mother had died. and he's sitting there singing a song, and I just got tears running down my eyes, like just hearing him. Like there's just something, like it's another brain, and it's not engineering based. It's a different thing, and it'll show up in the weirdest of places. It doesn't always just show up in Poland. Sometimes my wife will be cooking food here, and you get the smells. It smells are a big thing too, right? And I just feel this overwhelming need to speak Polish, right? And it's like no, that brain is taken over now, even though I'm sitting in America, right? When we go, same thing when we go there. When we're there, I feel an overwhelming need. It's tough. It makes my vacations exhausting, but I feel this overwhelming need to speak Polish while I'm there, right? And by the end, my brain hurts from all the new information. But it's interesting. I've like shed way more tears in Poland than I probably ever have in America. It's one of those things. I can logically explain a lot of things in English, right? But there's another kind of thing that I find interesting about Poland is that there's a lot of things that happen to me while I'm there that I can't explain, right? Like the whole like my wife and I when we met, we both said it that night. Like we feel like we've done this before, right? Like we were both like we were together in a previous, this is stuff that I would never believe English Americanville would never believe.
Yeah.
But it was like, and I was like, I have this feeling that like generations ago we met and we were at a party, and everything like that. And we've already done this, And like I said, I step on. My wife has a couple of jalkas out in the village. I walk on that thing, and it's just like I start shedding tears. The first time every year we go to Poland, the first time I'm on that piece of property, I start shedding tears. I don't know why. So there's something else going on that I don't completely understand. But
No,
as somebody who's been very logically based his entire life, it's fascinating me to explore this and see where it's going to take me.
no, this is really extremely interesting, and I've been, talking about the theory of the two brains for a long time, but you're the first person who admitted, it's true. It's
It's
really
one of
true.
those things where
You need to you just need to develop a second brain in
yeah,
order to speak
yeah.
Polish, and additionally to understand the whole the traditions and everything that you see in Poland.
That's one of the things, like, I know you've asked a lot of the other guys, what advice would they give? That's the advice I would give is just take in the entire thing. Almost like I said, just think of it as you're developing an entire another personality. And it's almost like you get the language for free kind of thing. Right? I know plenty of times, maybe not the beginning, but there's plenty of times where like the past couple of times to Poland, I would say, when I leave, I think I wrote to you the last time I was getting ready to leave Poland. I'm like, I'm so exhausted. I was angry. I was exhausted. I was just like worn out, because I try to keep
Yes,
it all in Polish the entire time. And I get home and I'm like, no Polish, I need a break. And so last year was in August. And this happened 2, 3 years in a row. I get to December and you can just feel it. Your brain's like, done. And it's done processing everything you took in Poland, everything I took in Poland while I was there, all the new stuff. And it was just like, okay, now you know it. And it's like specifically, we watch a lot of Polish TV. I don't have American TV. I only have Polish TV. And all of a sudden I'll sit down one night and I'm like there's a noticeable jump in my level. I'm like, this guy that I could never understand before, all of a sudden I like clear as day. And it's like this, and it's like I said, best I can explain it is your brain took everything in, is working through it all, and then it was like, okay, done. It's now accessible to you. Have fun.
very interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. The other
Yeah.
advice I would give is, and I probably maybe I wouldn't recommend this, is I've watched, I think around 1,100 episodes of Emiak Miłosz now. every Saturday and Sunday since 2011.
You deserve a medal, man. So you basically recommend watching series or this specific one?
Oh, honestly, I've watched this one is just the longest running one. I find it hard to get into new series. But my favorite one was Rancho.
Gotcha.
Rancho made me laugh like nothing else. I was dying when I was watching that. It is funny. Yeah, but but that one is like, okay, they're in like village life. If you're just trying to go in there understanding what they're saying, I think when I watched it, there was, it was on Polonia, so a lot of shows on Polonia have English subtitles. And so this was all the way back when I was first learning. I was watching it with English subtitles, but it was one of those. It made me make a connection with the culture, kind of more than learning Polish. It made me make a connection with the culture, kind of thing.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. So this was three amazing conversation and very interesting, very, very interesting. Thank you very much, Philip, and see you in the next one.
All right, take care.
Okay, okay, okay.